This is Amsterdam Avenue, and at first glance, you might be fooled into thinking that we're in Amsterdam Holland, with these cycle-friendly, tree-lined streets. But actually, we are in the heart of Mexico City, one of the worst cities for green urban spaces. Mexico City only has 2.2% green cover, which is terribly low. That's only 3.5 meters squared per inhabitant, which is far below the 9 meters squared recommended by the World Health Organization. Yet if you walk around the streets of this neighborhood called Colonial Condesa, you would never realize it. The streets are almost a paradise for pedestrians, runners and cyclists. If we switch to the street view on Google Maps, you can really start to get a picture of the size of these tree-lined streets. They are huge. The canopy covers almost the whole street, providing sufficient amount of shade not only for pedestrians but also for cars, which cools the urban space from the heat island effect. The tall trees also provide sufficient shade for high-rise buildings, and the treetops are also scenic to look at from apartment windows as well as from a street view perspective. And it also creates a pleasant experience for people sitting outside in cafes and restaurants. Even European cities that are supposed to be so incredibly well designed do not really have that many urban green spaces that compare to Avenue Amsterdam. For example, the dedicated pedestrian areas I've encountered in Europe tend to be wide and very urbanized, with small trees that are contained and confined within the concrete landscape. The trees are often all the same species, planted in lines. There's no diversity, it's all uniformity. Furthermore, the fallen leaves, which are the vital nutrients of a tree, are not allowed to degrade into the soil, and even when there's a small square inch of exposed earth left around the tree, humans still try to remove everything they can with leaf blowers and chemicals. Instead, on Avenue Amsterdam, nature starts to feel like the dominating force, despite the high density of apartment buildings all around. Walking through these streets is one of the closest experiences you'll have to walking in a forest in the middle of a city. This is because the green urban planning design has been made to replicate nature. There is a variation of different tree stands and understory shrubs. The dedicated area for the green space is actually twice as large as the actual pedestrian area, which allows for the leaf litter to fall. And what's great to see is that it's left to naturally degrade. These natural habitats in the urban areas provide benefits for humans, wildlife and biodiversity. They also sequester carbon. A study on urban green spaces showed that trees and shrubs are much more efficient carbon sinks compared to lawns. And the main contributions of carbon emissions in parks were irrigation and pesticide use. By creating a self-sustaining habitat like the green spaces of Avenue Amsterdam and the surrounding area, irrigation and pesticides do not need to be used. Trees also store more carbon as they age, so it's a priority that we plan for more green spaces in cities and that we create an environment where trees can live a long and healthy life. There is currently a high mortality rate for young trees, which are particularly vulnerable in the years it takes for them to establish in their new home. For example, nearly 50% of new trees added to one street in Toronto, Canada were dead within 3 years, which is a waste of time, money and resources. This is in stark contrast to the trees of Avenue Amsterdam, which are well established and have been here for some time. It was clear that people enjoyed using these spaces, so why not make more of them? I was curious to find out how the green streets of Colonial Condesa existed in the first place, and why they are not more common all over Mexico City and other cities across the world. Making walking more accessible for people and having healthy, long-lasting trees should be a priority in any city. Green urban infrastructure doesn't just fight the climate crisis, it improves people's health and well-being in an already oppressive and toxic cityscape. And this is exactly why Avenue Amsterdam and the streets of La Colonial Condesa were designed this way in the first place. They were inspired by the utopian ideals of the Garden City movement, which was intended to improve the quality of life for the working classes. The concept was developed by an Englishman, Ebenezer Howard. Garden cities were designed to provide access to the best aspects of both town and country living. Howard's ideas grew out of the Industrial Revolution and were a reaction to the conditions of workers in London. The Garden City movement has had a significant impact on today's urban planning standards across the world. Ebenezer Howard's work had a profound influence on Mexico City's planners, such as Jose Luis Cuevas, who developed several garden city projects, including Colonial Condesa in 1926. But he left aside the original idea of social welfare, opting for more lucrative residential housing for upscale markets. The neighborhood became popular with middle and upper classes, as well as a number of foreigners, especially artists, musicians, and writers. Many buildings were designed in the Art Deco style, many still well maintained today. It's unfortunate that the utopian ideas of Howard's garden cities that were supposed to be self-sufficient and a healthy place, particularly for lower income residents, was forfeited for more profitable goals. This inequality and disparity has only worsened over the last century. Today, 72% of neighborhoods in Mexico City do not have access to urban green spaces of any size within 300 meters. In the next 20 years, it is estimated around 70% of the world's population will be living in megacities or urban areas with a population of 10 million people or more. So it's essential that green spaces are planned for, but it's up to you in your local community to make sure city planners are doing this properly. By creating natural ecosystems for plants, trees, as well as for birds and the insects and pollinators they feed upon, the streets of Colonial Condesa and Avenue Amsterdam are an almost perfect example of how we can help trees to really thrive in the urban environment and provide the maximum benefit for city dwellers and the planet as a whole.